Today, I am going to continue reading from my book, The Myth of Budda. I am going to read Chapter 3 and Chapter 4. Chapter 3, The Choice. I stalked back to my room in the dark and waited to be called in to explain myself in the case of Father Callahan's disappearance. They would say I was seen going or coming to his room in a mysterious manner on the night the good father disappeared. But the night came and went, and no one cast suspicion on me. The official word was that he had taken leave to deal with the family business. But the nuns whispered amongst themselves more than usual, and a general air of anxiety became apparent across the campus. There remained no sign of Father Callahan and no explanation for his disappearance. I was racked with guilt. I had to confess. I couldn't keep silent, knowing I was responsible for what had happened to him. I hadn't meant to turn him into a toad and hadn't meant for the bird to eat him. But I was responsible, and I couldn't face the nuns and the other children every day with that guilt festering inside of me. I sat down that night at the desk in my room with a piece of stationery and a pencil. I wrote my confession. I kept it as simple as I could. I am a witch. I turned Father Callahan into a toad. I did not mean to, but I did, and I am sorry. Sincerely, Violet Ivy. I wanted to give it directly to the superior mother, Mother Nan, as soon as it was done, but I did not want to wake her. I resolved to pass the sleepless night in despair and hand it to her in the morning. I resigned myself to whatever came after that. As I lay there, imagining what it might be like to be burned at a stake, something bumped the windowsill above my head. I looked there and saw an owl perching right at my window. It had large eyes and a sharp beak. It fixed me with a stare, and I returned it. It didn't move or fly away. The owl was there for me. I am an evil witch, doomed to be punished, I said to it. What would you want with me? But the owl only stayed, as if waiting for me. I decided to go out. I would have to walk around the building to see it at my windowsill. But as I stepped outside, the owl appeared, landing in a tree close by. It called and lifted from its perch, hovering in the air. It meant for me to follow it. I still held the confession note. I folded it in quarters and followed the owl as it flew ahead of me, just visible enough in the darkness that I could make out its tail feathers. It flew across the grounds of the orphanage and into the woods that lay past it. The trees and brush grew thick on either side, but I seemed to move freely through it, never stumbling or catching my clothing on branches. The forest darkness was broken by the soft yellow light of the owl's glowing body. I decided to let it take me wherever it would. I lost all sensation of time and motion as I followed it. It landed in a tall tree full of thick and leafy branches. I gazed up at the owl. It made a faint hoot. Something caught my eye from the ground, and when I looked down, there was an outfit of clothing faintly shimmering as it lay there. A pink shin-high dress with a yellow belt at the waist, along with a matching pair of forearm-length gloves and a bright, red-heeled pair of shoes. I had been so torn with guilt in my room, but now there was none. I unfolded it and read the words. It was as if they were made by someone else. I ripped it into tiny pieces and let them drift to the ground. I undressed, letting my school uniform fall. I picked up the dress. It shimmered in my hands, smooth and clean. It fit as if made for me. I donned the gloves, picked up the hat, and placed it on my head. I noticed another item then. an empty wicker basket resting beneath the tree. When I picked it up and folded off the top, there were 2 glasses and a bottle of wine. The basket was deep, and there was room for something else. I had the feeling this was a magic basket. It could hold whatever I placed there. I saw something moving on the ground in the darkness next to a stone. I moved quickly and grabbed it before it could slither away. It wrapped itself around my arm like it wanted to squeeze it from my body, but I pulled it free, placed it in the basket, and secured the top. When I was dressed, with the basket in hand, the owl began to fly again. I followed it, sinking into a trance. I felt the sensation of lifting above the trees and flying with the owl, disappearing into clouds and emerging from them again, perfectly ecstatic. Eventually, it flew down amongst knobby trees and swampy water. I moved through all of it with an ease that wasn't natural. Soon the sun rose above the trees. The owl kept flying, and I followed it. It took me here. I saw you step off your porch and come towards me. When I was in front of you, the owl flew away. They had drunk the bottle of wine during her story, and his head buzzed from the effects of it. They took a walk after her story. He held her hand as he contemplated it. Chapter 4, Homecoming. He took her down a familiar trail along the swamp. They had to step over cypress knees and dodge thorny vines. Eventually, they rested again beneath a tree that bore the jagged marks of a long-ago lightning strike down its bark. "How did you come to live in the swamp?" she asked. "I was a swamp boy before I was a swamp boy," he said. "I was drawn to wild places, especially the wet, boggy land behind our home. I always loved the mushrooms. I believed they must be meant to give shelter to elves and fairies. I liked to study them, how some had wider tops than others. Some clung to logs, and others grew from grass or next to trees. Some had delicate gills on the back of their caps, and others were rougher. I collected as many different kinds as I could find. I kept them in paper sacks, but Daddy would throw them away when he found them. He said they were dirty, and he'd give me licks if I brought them inside again. I hid them in the back of my closet after that. Daddy had a lot of rules, and they were easy to forget. When he was home, I had to remember not to jump on my bed, not to run in the house, or splash water on the floor when I took a bath. I had to eat my green beans at dinner, and not forget to turn off the light or make up my bed. I always had to be mindful if I wanted to avoid the belt, and I could be, but sometimes I would forget. It was my nature to be loud and active when I played. It was easy to forget Daddy's rules, but he always helped me to remember them. When he was gone to work, Mom and I were free. She liked to be in the woods as much as me, and we would go there to walk and talk for hours. Mom knew the names of all the plants and trees. She knew about mushrooms too. When she found edible ones, she would make a meal for the 2 of us. Daddy didn't like mushrooms, and he said we'd probably poison ourselves from eating them. But we didn't, and when Mom prepared them, they were delicious. When she was foraging, I tended to wander away. The forest seemed so vast, and I wanted to explore it. I would get lost and call for Mom until I found her again. She begged me to stay close, but it would always be the same. I couldn't help myself. Mom didn't get angry at me for disappearing into the forest like Daddy did about forgetting the rules in the house. I couldn't get away from his belt, even though I tried to be good and stand still, but it was hard not to try to jump away. He laughed at my welts. If he had let him hit me on the fat part of my butt, it wouldn't have happened, he said. Mama couldn't always get away from his belt either. If he didn't think she did a good enough job sweeping the floor, if his pork chops were too cold, or if she had bought me a toy that cost too much money, she would get the belt too. But mostly she got it because she wouldn't be quiet when he was angry. She told him he needed to control his temper. She said the army had changed him, but telling him only made him angrier. He said we just needed to use some common sense to not make him angry, and then things would be easier for him and us. She needed to stop making me a spoiled brat by giving in every time I whined about something. She said neither her nor I was the problem, and she was going to leave him if he didn't change. It was always a mistake to tell him she was going to leave, because that's when he would become the angriest. Daddy would say she wasn't going anywhere. He would drive away in his truck and come back hours later. I knew to avoid him when he came back because that's when his temper was at its worst. If I could avoid him, he would soon drink a beer and be asleep in their bedroom. The next day, they would act as if nothing happened. They might even be extra nice to one another, but it wouldn't be long before the cycle would repeat itself. Mama sometimes said she knew Daddy was a good man in his heart. It was just that things had happened to him that made him get angry too easily. She hoped that in time he would be the man she knew he could be again. She wanted to see it happen, but she couldn't wait much longer. I hate when you see us behave like that, and then that's when I want to take you and leave. But afterwards, I think he will change, and I stay. I'm wrong either way, she said. I got a bad belting the evening before it happened, the night I came to the swamp. It was all because I wouldn't eat my green beans, and Mom told Daddy she wanted to go to see her parents for a few days. Her sister was about to get married, and she wanted to spend time with her a couple of days before the wedding. He didn't say no, but he was already upset about the prospects of being alone. She should have waited until after dinner to tell him, but maybe she hadn't known it would put him in such a bad mood. Say the blessing, Lynn, he said. He was already angry, and Mom's prayer didn't help. She bowed her head. Dear Lord, thank you for allowing us to sit as a family and enjoy this meal. Please help us to hold our tempers and live in harmony with one another. In Jesus' name, amen. I wasn't hungry, but I nibbled my roll and pork chop. I sampled a bit of the rice, but didn't touch the green beans. I hated how stringy they looked, but worse was how they smelled. Daddy made me put a helping on my plate, even though he knew I hated them. It was important to eat your vegetables, he said. I steeled myself, put a single green bean on my fork, placed it in my mouth, and gagged. Stop putting on, he said. Frank, let him eat an apple instead. I'll get him one. You know he doesn't like green beans. He needs to eat his vegetables, Lynn. He's anemic. I was going to give it another try. I was just taking a swallow of milk first. The glass was wet with condensation, and my hands were sweaty. I kept wiping them with my napkin, but they kept sweating. As I raised it to take a swallow, it slipped from my hands and spilled on the table. Some of the milk fell onto Daddy's lap before I could stop it. Bring the napkins, Lynn, he said. Your son is a clumsy oaf. He stood and wiped the milk off of his lap. He looked at me and pulled his belt loose with a flourish that terrified me. He told me to turn around. I was wearing shorts, but wished it was jeans. I tried to stay still, but it was always impossible. After the third blow, I fell to my knees, a puddle of tears. I couldn't help it. Stand up, son, Daddy said. I didn't hit you that hard. Do you want to know what hard is? I looked for Mama, but didn't see her. I could hear her crying from their bedroom. She had taken my plate from the table. No, sir, I said. Go to bed now, Dad said. I don't want to see your face right now." I slunk to my room and did my best to cry silently. After a while, Mama came in and lay beside me. "Honey, I'm so sorry," she said. "I didn't mean to spill the milk. It just slipped. I tried to eat the green beans, but I don't like them, and they made me gag. I'm sorry." I went to sleep with her arm around me, but when I woke, she was gone. I was cold and shivering, although I hadn't been cold when I had gone to sleep. I noticed my window was open, but that didn't explain the cold. It was a warm night. I tried to control my shivering. I was so cold, and I began to feel that I wasn't alone. I wanted to go back to Mama and Daddy's room, but I knew I shouldn't. Daddy would only make me come back. I lay there shivering and eventually opened my eyes as I lay on my back. My instinct was right. I was not alone. Standing over me was a figure. It was black and featureless with an overly large head and long, bony fingers. It placed its cold hand over mine, and I would have screamed if I had not been paralyzed with fear. It pulled me to the window. I went with it, somehow leaving my body where it lay on the bed. I flew through it into the night. Its hand is still gripping mine. We flew above the trailer park and deep into the darkness. For a time, we were one with the night, as invisible as the wind. But soon we came down past tall, stumpy trees, crashing in muddy water. The air was warm and thick there. The water was slimy between my toes. Mosquitoes swarmed and buzzed around my face and ears. The night was still, and the ripe scent of the swamp was very strong. Roots and sticks poked against my feet beneath the mud. The figure was still beside me. It moved to stand in front of me. It held a mushroom in front of my face. I took it by its stem. I understood what it wanted me to do. Like Dad, it wanted me to eat an unappetizing item. But I didn't hesitate. I took a generous bite of the cap and swallowed. It tasted like rubber and mud. The figure watched, waiting for something. It swam away like a wave. Everything was swirling colors. I became a beam of light, or maybe a drop of rain falling from a cloud very slowly, stretched so thin it was like a film as it crashed against the water's surface and scattered in all directions. My body restored itself, and I was myself again. I was alone in the middle of an unfamiliar swamp. The figure had left me, but eyes from the trees gazed down on me. Their twisted faces and gnarled limbs reached for me. Their voices murmured in the breeze that shook the leaves. Below me, in the water, were also hostile faces floating and shifting. Out of hopeless instinct, I called for my mother, but she was not here. I stumbled through the swamp, splashing and lost. The trees seemed to sway low to reach for me as the shifting faces under the waters reached up to pull me down. My foot snagged upon a vine, and when I attempted to unravel it, the more tightly it wound itself around me, and the deeper I sank. It pulled me over my head. I tried to pull my foot free with all of my strength, but it only pulled me down more easily. My breath at last gave way. Water filled my lungs. I fell in the darkness. But in the next moment, I was choking out water on a muddy shore, the figure's mouth attached to mine. Its coldness filled me. Its mouth tasted dry and ancient. I was dead, and it breathed life into me again. It released me and let me stand. I wanted to ask it how I could go home, but it disappeared to mist. I sensed I had changed even before I saw my reflection on the water in the morning light. My skin was green. Fish gills protruded from my cheeks. My hair was a muddy bowl against my scalp. I resembled a monster, but I still wanted to go home. Mama would still love me, and Daddy might not care. But I could not go home. I was lost. Exhausted, I lay beneath a tree and slept. When I woke, the sun was higher in the sky, and I felt better. My skin was still green, and I still had gills, but I was calm. I began to walk just to be moving. I thought of nothing. I took in the sights and smells of the swamp, the stench of rotting trees and leaves, the black water and mossy cypress trees. Last night they felt threatening, but now they seemed possible allies. Alligators' snouts and eyes peered at me from all sides. Snakes were plentiful, slithering through ferns and bushes. Turtles sunned on fallen logs. Dragonflies and other bugs flitted about. I waded over stumps and roots. I tried to avoid becoming tangled in them again. But I had no trouble. It was easy. I felt no discomfort. A sense of contentment flowed over me. In spite of it, I only wanted to go home. I wanted to see Mama and the big tomcat that hung around our trailer, to eat pancakes and play with my stuffed monkey. I didn't feel as scared now, but I was still sad. I might have been so far from home I could walk the rest of my life and never reach it. But for some reason, I kept moving. At some point, I noticed I had traveled in a single direction without much meandering. I was walking like a person going somewhere. I walked, and the swamp persisted. A still black lake that narrowed and widened, but never disappeared. I walked and thought of nothing but being home. I thought of how Mama would embrace me, and maybe even Daddy would be happy to see me. I thought of how scared they had probably been. I walked through the swamp and eventually emerged from it. I stepped out of it onto the familiar land near my family's trailer. I had walked all day through the swamp and emerged from it just at dusk. I came to my bedroom window and found that it was open. I climbed through it. The spread and sheets were pulled off the bed, but otherwise it was as I left it. I replaced the bed covers and snuggled beneath them. I felt two things. One was to immediately leave this room that no longer felt like home. The swamp felt like home, and now I was an animal invading a human space. I was their fair-skinned boy, changed to a green-skinned monster. I should get away and spare them the shock of seeing me. The second desire was to rest. The bed was so comfortable after my long walk. I snuggled with my stuffed monkey and fell asleep. My mother's scream woke me. When I opened my eyes, she was pointing at me with wide, terrified eyes. "Mama, it's me," I wanted to say, but no words came from my mouth, only hissing sounds that frightened her even more. I should have left, and I wanted to now. I just didn't want to scare her anymore. Before I could get away, my father came into the room. His shotgun was cocked and pointed at me. "Did you kill him?" he asked. I saw it all in my mind in a flash. It must have been part of the magic. My body was cold when Mama found me the next morning. I had somehow gone into the swamp with the figure and left my body was behind. My mother was weeping, and my father stood next to her with his arm around her as they carted my body into an ambulance. That had been days ago, and now they had found me, a monster, sleeping in their dead son's bed. I meant to answer his question, but he was already pulling back the shotgun's hammer. Magic flashed from my hands as he fired. The gun changed to a long, wiggling snake, and mushrooms popped from the barrel. They dropped harmlessly to the floor, and Daddy fell to his knees. He put his face to the ground. "Did you kill him?" he asked again. Mama was behind me, too afraid to move. I had to leave her. I leaped out the window and retreated to the forest. I went deeper into the swamp than I had come. I wanted to go to where no one would ever find me. I found a hollow tree with a nest of snakes inside. I felt comforted as they crawled over me, seeming to sympathize with my plight. In nights to come, I bedded down with alligators. I let the birds, turtles, and insects teach me their languages. I learned that the trees speak to one another, and if I'm very still, I hear them whispering amongst themselves. I'm glad you are content here, she said. They started walking again. He took her to see the little mushroom plot that had once been the paper with the drawings of the dancers. Let me show you what a bird brought me today, right before you came along. He flashed magic from his hands, and the mushrooms were changed again to the paper with the dancing costume people. They looked at it together. Want to join them? Violet asked. If you're with me, he said. Bob thought of the dancers and where they might be. Violet watched the sky. A giant white egret appeared in the sky. It came slowly towards them and landed on long, thin legs with webbed feet. It lowered itself and spread its wings in front of them, inviting them to climb onto its back. They settled into its downy feathers. Bob wrapped his arms around its neck, and Violet wrapped hers around his back. The bird lifted into the air and flew far beyond the swamp. The ground became miniature below them, and they flew through crowds and felt too close to the sun.